Today we are going to talk about two new Michigan laws, the Crown Act and the Distracted Driving Law. We're going to share with you what they mean for employers, whether you have employees in Michigan or whether you don't. Welcome to Off the Clock, the webcast of employment attorneys at Miller Johnson, where we discuss what is happening in the HR world and provide practical insight and advice.
And I am excited about this topic because I feel like it hasn't been the first one that you mentioned, the Crown Act, because I haven't been hearing a lot about it. Yeah. And I haven't seen a lot written on it.
Yes.
And I'm not sure exactly why, but it's something we all need to know about in the employment world.
We certainly
right?
all need to have a basic understanding of exactly what it is, right? And how it could impact employers in the way they, I think probably mostly the way they apply dress policies and appearance standards and things like that. So,
right.
But let's first explain to our
why are we excited?
Yes, right.
Nobody knows.
Let's explain to our listeners what the Michigan Crown Act did when the Crown Act was introduced and passed. I looked at whether other states had passed similar laws, and you probably won't be surprised to hear that Michigan was not the first.
No, we rarely are.
We rarely are. We're somewhere in the 20s.
Sorry, no offense to Michigan, but we're a fast follower,
yeah,
as they say, but we're really the leader.
We're somewhere in the 20s. The first state was California. And
a leader in a lot of things.
The term, the acronym Crown Act, has been used consistently in just about every state that's passed a similar law. So what the Crown Act did is changed the definition of the term race in Michigan civil rights law, which we know is the Elliott-Larsen Civil Rights Act here in Michigan, right? So that's the law that tells employers that they are not allowed to discriminate or treat employees differently based on certain characteristics, one of which is race.
Okay.
And the Crown Act changed the term race to add, and I'm going to read this to you. I see you putting on your glasses, right? Traits historically associated with race, including but not limited to hair texture and protective hairstyles.
So I will tell you, I read the headlines when the Crown Act passed, and I thought, okay, so hair. I just thought it was hair associated with race. You can't discriminate based on that. Got it. And then when we started digging into it, we thought, no, it doesn't just say
it's
hair.
Not just hair.
Hair is one of the items, but any trait historically associated with race.
Yes.
That's a very interesting phrase.
It really is an interesting phrase. And again, almost exactly the same verbiage that other states have used when they've passed their own Crown Acts. My first thought was, could that include traits beyond physical traits or characteristics?
Because it doesn't say physical traits.
It doesn't use the term physical. Other states have said, though, that the term race, as we apply and understand the word race, usually does refer to physical characteristics, right? So when we say traits historically associated with race, I think probably the law is talking about a person's physical traits or physical characteristics, not things like how they dress, what jewelry they're wearing,
stereotypes,
traditions, cultural, other cultural things, etc. Does that make sense? It's really a difference between the word culture and the term race.
I agree, yes, and I think we may see some lawsuits pushing the boundaries on that, right? I mean, I think that at first blush, right, is probably the most right down the middle way to look at it, but the word that catches my attention is historically associated.
Right.
So if it's just physical attributes associated with what is the historically
word?
Yeah. doing there.
It's interesting, isn't
I think it.
right?
I really do. When I started reading it word for word, I thought, well, this is a much more interesting
Right.
piece of legislation than there's more nuance to it, right? There's more to be. There's more to come out of this, right?
I think that's right.
As
think
it
that's
unfolds.
right. But we certainly know that it applies to both hair texture and protective hairstyles. For our listeners who are wondering what protective hairstyles means, it's really referring to things like braids, twists, locks, etc., that are used to maintain healthy hair. Okay, so that's what that is talking about. And so when I think about what this change means for our listeners and for employers, I think primarily it's going to impact how they write and apply their standards for how employees have to appear in the workplace.
Right. I agree. Right. Grooming standards in particular, right? Length of hair, that sort of thing.
Yes.
Right. They're now going to have to, you can have the policy, but you have to be willing to take an individual look at making an exception, right? When someone says, but I can't, right? Because of X, Y, or Z.
I think that's right. And I think I would actually go a little bit farther and add to that. If I had a policy, if I saw or were reviewing a policy that explicitly prohibited a hairstyle, for example, you can't have an afro. You can't have dreadlocks. No, but I would not.
Okay.
I would not. I would say take a time out. You can't have that policy. So you don't want to have a policy that would explicitly prohibit a hairstyle that we know has been historically associated with a certain race. And equally so, even if the policy is written neutrally, we would want to make sure it's not applied in a way that discriminates against an employee.
You are absolutely right. A policy should not call out certain hairstyles that are historically associated with race. Frankly, all the policies I look at have usually been done at one time or another by a previous Miller Johnson lawyer, right? Been through 10 iterations of handbooks before it gets to me, other generations of lawyers. So, but you're right, yes, that if you haven't looked at your grooming standards lately, it might be a good time to pull those out and brush those off and make sure that there's no old language in there that is problematic.
Right, exactly.
And then it's the application.
Right.
Yeah.
And there have been recent situations in which individuals have been treated differently because of hairstyles. For example, New Jersey adopted their Crown Act specifically in response to a high school wrestler who wasn't allowed to compete until he agreed to cut his dreadlocks, for example, right? So these issues can arise, they can come up, and it's important that employers understand that those traits now are protected under Michigan law and the law of many other states as well.
Okay. What else has changed in state law in Michigan?
Okay. So this one impacts, I think, probably just about every single one of us on a personal level. And also many of us as an employer, right?
And as parents.
Yes, and as parents, right, as well, certainly, yes. Yeah. And so what I'm referring to is the new Michigan distracted driving law.
Yeah.
Okay. That became effective at the end of June 30th. So alert to everyone. I was spreading the news as best I could in my household and to friends and all the teenagers I knew, right?
Right.
Be aware.
Right. But it's not just teenagers. It's, let's just be honest, right? It's you and me and lots of other busy people.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
Yes, and that's an important point that we're going to get to in a few minutes. But Michigan had previously banned texting while driving.
Yep.
Hopefully we all knew that. We were not supposed to be driving our cars while also texting, emailing, etc. Okay. This new law took that a step further. And essentially what I would say is that the big picture is if you're operating a vehicle, you cannot have a cell phone in your hand.
Okay.
To do really anything.
Okay. If a cell phone is in your hand and a cop sees it,
Yes.
you can be pulled over.
Yes.
Period. No other questions.
Period. I know I personally, when I saw this law come through, I was wondering whether red lights were an exception. Just asking for a friend.
So you're that person in front of me when
and
the light changes
yes.
and doesn't go.
Not anymore.
That's you.
I'm not anymore, because the answer to that question is also you cannot have a cell phone in your hand if you're at a stop sign, a red light, etc. Right?
So while you are operating a vehicle.
Whether you're when you're operating a vehicle.
Essentially means the car is on.
So that includes, right, having a cell phone in your hand to send a text message, to talk on the phone, right? You cannot be driving holding a cell phone to your ear. You cannot post to social media. You can't take videos. The list goes on, right? You can't do any of those things. You also can't be manually operating navigation on your phone, holding your phone.
I think that's a tough one for people.
Going on. Well, and let me tell you a little anecdote. The 2 days after this law was passed, someone I know, who shall not be named and is not related to me, by the way.
At least not on air.
No.
I'll find out.
Was driving through Grand Rapids, and there was an accident. So as many of us do when there's an accident, she thought, I'm going to look on my navigation and see if there's a different way I should take. Mm-hmm. She has an old car. She doesn't have a navigation screen or device in her car. So she was crawling along, maybe stopped, and had her cell phone in her hand and was...
Searching for an alternate.
Searching for the alternate route. Thank you. Cop pulled her over and said, do you know why I pulled you over? She hadn't gotten the word and said, I have no idea why you pulled me over. And the police officer informed her that she was in violation of the new distracted driving law. And she got a ticket, not a fine. Interestingly, I think they must be some police officers or some jurisdictions may be operating a grace period before they include the fines, but she did get a ticket, right? So that is, to me, that was an anecdote that said, okay, number one, police are looking to enforce and educate drivers about the new law. And number two, it really does mean you cannot have your cell phone in your hand to be navigating.
Before we get to how this impacts employers, talk to me. This is the part I find fascinating and a little weird about the law. Talk to me about how interactive touch screens in phones are, because a lot of us use CarPlay, right, so that what's on our phone shows up on the screen in our car for those of us that have screens in our car, or our cars, the newer cars, come with built-in screens and touch screens.
So the emphasis, and that's a great question, the emphasis of the law really is pushing drivers towards some sort of hands-free option, whether it be voice activated or touch screen in your car. So the law does allow a driver to be touching a screen,
but not a phone screen.
To maybe answer. Yes, I mean, yes. Well, and I'm assuming the reason behind that is that typically your eyes are still at least up when you're touching a screen, whereas when you're on your phone, typically you're holding a phone in your hand and your eyes are down.
Interesting.
That I'm just guessing as to the why. Drivers can use a touch screen in their car to navigate, to make phone calls, etc. Of course, the phone calls would have to be hands-free. They've got to be on Bluetooth or something, because they can't, even if they can initiate the call via touchscreen, they can't then have the phone to their ear. They can't be holding the phone to their ear.
So for folks who are lucky enough to have newer cars and cars outfitted with more technology, this isn't going to have as dramatic of an impact. So this is an employment law show, I think.
Right.
Although we could talk about many
more
things.
Or less.
Someday we'll expand. But for now, why do employers need to care about this?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. When I read the new law, I immediately thought of all the individuals who are driving as part of their job. including you and me and other people we know and work with,
Yes.
right, who are driving as part of our
Yes.
job. And I thought about what employers should be doing to make sure, number one, that those individuals are aware of this when they're driving as part of their work, and are following the rules, and have the ability to follow the rules, have the equipment to follow the rules.
Because as we mentioned, in an older car or with an older phone, this isn't so easy.
Right.
Yeah.
And of course, part of our job is to go to the worst case scenario for our clients, right?
That's why people love us.
That's why.
So everyone loves a lawyer.
Right. And to me, of course, my brain went to the worst case scenario, and that is an employee who is driving as part of their job, is not aware of or is violating this new law, gets into a terrible accident and injures somebody else or themselves, right? And let's just take it a step farther. Let's say they were talking to their supervisor who may have known that they were violating the law when they got into an accident, right? Which to me says, I do think we are at a place now in which employers should be seriously thinking about what they should be affirmatively doing in this space.
So what should they affirmatively be doing?
Right.
I think folks are wondering.
Yeah. So minimally, I would say this is a great opportunity for employers who have folks who drive for work, which is most of them.
Right.
Some.
I agree.
Some not
at
a lot.
Least one or two
lot,
employees. Maybe that's not their business. But,
at a minimum, I think this is a chance to send a communication, at least making sure they all know about the new law and clearly understand that the employer expects them to comply with those requirements.
Right.
If we want to get a gold star, right? If we want to really win, then I would even take that a step farther. And I would think about doing two things, which is having a more robust written driving policy, which has rules that follow the new Michigan law. And by the way, you might have employers in other states who are driving in other states with other laws too.
Yeah.
But really are very clear that are prohibitive and say you cannot have your phone in your hand. Here's what you have to do, etc. By the way, driving policies are also a great opportunity to talk about other things like insurance and having a valid driver's license and what to do if you get a ticket while you're driving for work, etc. We won't get into that today. So I think we could consider doing that. And then also have some sort of path for employees to notify the employer if they simply don't have the equipment they need.
Right. That's what really concerns me, frankly.
Yes,
Sarah.
because they're driving. Somebody who really is spending quite a bit of time driving for work is in a situation in which it's unavoidable for them to be taking and receiving phone calls while they're driving for work. And they don't have the equipment, the hands-free equipment, so that they can do that safely.
Right.
Right? Some way for them to come to HR and say, I cannot do my job and be in compliance with this law.
Right.
And then a path to figure out a solution to that, right? Is it a hands-free device for the phone? Is it some sort of reimbursement policy to get a new phone, for example, that would allow them to be hands-free, et cetera?
A few different areas where folks can dust off the policies,
right?
For the Crown Act and now for the distracted driving law as well.
Yes, exactly.
Well, I think everyone knows everything they should know.
Perfect.
What do you think?
I think so too.
Okay, then let's say goodbye.
All right. Okay. Thanks, Rebecca. Have a great day.
You too.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.